Hello and good morning, geometry. It is officially day 2 of distance learning, which means you should be watching this video on Wednesday, April 1st. And we're going to keep reviewing some old units. And so our focus today is going to be looking at how to use the midpoint and distance formula. And I know we did that way back in the fall, but we want to keep these skills fresh. So before we look at these skills, I do want to give you some feedback on your quizzes from last class. So thank you for all who filled it out and used your official name. That made my life a lot easier when I was looking at who actually had completed it and who still needed to. So please, if you are still using a nickname or kind of half of your name and half of a nickname, it would make my life a lot easier if you just use your first and last name or first name and initial, something where it's easy to find you in a moment. The second thing is I can see how long each of the questions take you to answer. So for example, if you had a multi-step equation and you answered it in 2 seconds incorrectly, I am going to assume that you just took a wild guess. I'm going to encourage you to use a scrap piece of paper while you're going through and actually going through and completing those problems that I'm giving you. And then if you have a question, you can reach out to me and I'd love to help you with that. So during today's video, I'm actually going to encourage you to take some notes, which I know we haven't done in a long time, especially if you don't have your math binder home with you. So we're going to be talking about 2 formulas that I know we've used before. We've already taken our mastery test on it. But if you don't have these formulas in front of you, working on the quizzes is going to be a little bit more difficult. So we're going to jump right into things. The first thing we're going to review is talking about using the midpoint formula. And the midpoint formula is used when you have a line segment to find the exact middle of that segment. And so what you need in order to find the midpoint is the coordinates of the endpoints. So don't forget, a coordinate has 2 numbers, right? The x value and the y value. So when we're looking at a point, the first point we're talking about has a first x value, x1, and a second a first y value, y1. The second point is made up of a new x value and a new y value, x2, y2. So your first point, your second point. Once you've identified your 2 endpoints of your line segment, you can actually substitute them into your midpoint formula. And don't forget, midpoint means find the middle, the average. So if you take your first x value and add it to your second x value and divide it by 2, finding the average, you're finding the middle of your x values. If you take your first y value and add it to your second y value divided by 2, you're finding the middle of your y values. So we are going to use the midpoint formula to go through an example together. Okay, we got it up there. So for the sake of time in all these videos, if you didn't have enough time to write down that midpoint formula, make sure you go back and freeze it while it's nice and big in front of you so that you can write it down as we go. So we are going to use this midpoint formula and we are going to find the midpoint of a line segment with endpoints 3, 2 and 10, -8. And so the first thing we need to do is identify which point represents which value, right? So in our first point, the 3 represents our first x value. So that we're going to mark that as x1. The 2 is the y coordinate. So that would be our first y value. That would be y1. The second point is made up of a new x value, so x2. And -8 would represent our y2 value. Now it's a matter of substituting into our midpoint formula. x1 plus x2. x1 plus x2, that would be 3 plus 10 divided by 2. And then y1 plus y2, 2 plus -8 divided by 2. And don't forget, you are finding the coordinates of a new point. So we need to keep writing them using our parentheses and our comma to separate our x and y value. Now we just do the math. 3 plus 10 is 13. We're going to have to keep that divided by 2. And 2 plus -8, or 2 minus 8, is -6 divided by 2. And you know you're a mathematician, so we can't leave these fractions like this. We need to simplify. 13 divided by 2 would be 6.5, since 2 goes into 13 6.5 times. And negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. So the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints 3, 2 and 10, negative 8 is the point 6.5, negative 3. So if you wanted to leave this as a simplified fraction, you can use a mixed number, that's fine, but we're going to use decimals. So that's our quick refresh on midpoint formula. And then the second thing that we're going to be covering today is our distance formula. So instead of finding the center of that segment, we're going to find how long that segment is. So we're going to use our distance formula. The same setup. You need 2 points. So if you have the endpoints of the first point, x1, y1, and the second point, x2, y2, you can substitute them into your distance formula. Distance is equal to, don't forget, everything is under the square root in the distance formula. Instead of adding together your x values, we're going to find the difference. So we're going to take our x2 and subtract our x1 value and square that number. And then we're going to add it to the difference of our y value, so y2 minus our y1 value squared. And then it's just a matter of doing some arithmetic to simplify this. So I'm going to swap out our midpoint formula, and again, if you'd like to go back to freeze that frame so you can write down your distance formula, I would do that. There we are. And we are going to find the distance formula between these 2 points here, 3, 5 and negative 1, 2. Actually, I think I could stand, yeah. So we are going to mark out our x1, y1, x1, y1, x2, y2, and then we're going to substitute them into our distance formula. Our distance is going to be equal to the square root, so again across the entire piece there, of x2 minus x1. x2, negative 1, minus x1, 3 squared, plus, now we have y2 minus y1, y2, which is 2, minus y1, which is 5, squared. So that's the setup. Once you've substituted these in, I know in class we started using our graphing calculators where we could just plug it all in at once and then simplify. But since we don't have those, we're going to go step by step. So we're going to work inside out of our parentheses. So starting with negative 1 minus 3. Negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. We still have to square that number. Plus, we're going to simplify 2 minus 5 is negative 3 squared. Bring down everything we haven't used yet. And we are still finding our distance. And so since we took care of everything inside of the parentheses, we need to now take care of our exponents. Negative 4 squared does not mean negative 4 times 2. It means negative 4 times negative 4, right? It's this number multiplied by itself twice. So negative 4 times negative 4 is going to give me 16. And then we still have addition between here. And negative 3 times negative 3, same reason it's not 6. Negative 3 times negative 3 is actually 9. And I could bring down my square root and distance. And then my last 2 steps. First, we're going to add together. We have like terms in here, right? 16 plus 9 is 25. And then our very last step is to take care of that square root. So if I found the square root of 25, my distance of this segment is equal to 5, because 5 times 5 is equal to 25. So we just went through 2 formulas. We have our midpoint formula. So again, if you needed to freeze it and you didn't write it down yet, freeze it right here to write down. And we also went through our distance formula. So if you have any questions, please send me an email. I'm going to try to set up a Zoom so that we can talk in person if that makes things easier. But you should have some notes this time. You should use your first and last name on your quizzes to make my life easier. Otherwise, once you watch this video, complete your quizzes and then email me with any questions. All right? Stay well.